So, welcome to the Books That Make the World Better podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Browdy, and I'm so honored to have with me today Great-Grandmother Mary Lyons, an Ojibwe Elder who holds space for the United Nations Indigenous knowledge holders and wisdom keepers of the 7 regions of the world. She travels and teaches internationally with a particular focus on families, communities, and individuals who have faced disparities that prevent them from moving forward in a healthier manner. An author, documentarian, and circle keeper of wellness, she holds freedom for all close to her heart through her work as a spiritual advisor and storyteller. She continues to support the wellness of sobriety as she walked in those footprints and treasures the organic ways of her ancestral lifestyles. And Mary Lyons is a Greenfire Press author of this beautiful book. Perhaps you can see Wisdom Lessons, Spirited Guidance from an Ojibwe Great-Grandmother. So, Great-Grandmother Mary, welcome. So glad to be with you today.
Oh, bonjour. Yes, thank you. Milo Gesep. I'm saying thank you and good morning because some parts of the world is morning, and we always say morning doesn't have to be a reflection on that first daylight. Morning can be when you first open your eyes and rested on the day. So, there's no chronological saying good morning at 6 or in the AM.
Good day. Good day.
Yeah, that's a good day. So yeah, it's an honor to be here, and I'm so excited to speak with you. Um, a lot's going on, as of course you know. Well, I always say, I'm a resident of Mother Earth, but the bill collectors find me in Minnesota. So, having said that, I think you probably know what is happening on my homelands because I think it's really important to first realize if we want to really look at finding the foundation of what is really happening here, we have to really look at the historical perspective of it because these homelands are the Dakota people of where I'm sitting, and the northern part of the state and towards Canada, and that there is the Anishinaabe Ojibwe. Um, and these are the original people of these lands. So I think it's really important to make that acknowledgement. And yeah, let's just go from there.
Mm-hmm. So, how are things looking and feeling today in Minneapolis or Minnesota?
Yeah, I'm busy every day. I'm busy every day on it from phone calls, emails, planning, supporting, trying to do, some events and supporting this stuff to a lot of people. And I think one of the things that was really important that, people seem to continuously ask is that question, how are you doing? And I think that is so important and that question holds a lot of power and value, but it just kind of is a hit and miss question.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because uh, a lot of the triggers that are happening, and these triggers don't happen to come from the opposing side of ICE. They carry those metal guns, but the triggers everybody carries because what really triggers the past, can reflect into what today is happening. So, there's a lot of this really cloud of post traumatic stress that is either brewing or growing or rebirthing itself within these territories. Because you got to remember, we have a lot of people that fought in the wars. We have a lot of people that have come from countries that were in devastating conditions and stuff because of war times. We have the 11 tribes here and out there, as we spoke of, when you speak of historical value and out there, we've gone through the repression and whatever else that's connecting to anything of survival. So that's just inbred of it, and that is our blanket of who we are as individuals. That doesn't necessarily say who we are as a spiritual being, because that part you can't touch. You just can't touch that spiritual being of who we are, not just as Indigenous people, all life here on the planet. So when that question is asked, um, when people go, how are you doing? I try not to ask that question, especially to a lot of my fellow Minnesotans and out there. You know, I always say, what can we smile about today? What is going to be the power behind who we are as individuals, of taking back that power that we didn't even knowing we gave it away, because fear, to have such fear is like this power magnet, a power magnet that strips all your happiness away. And when you try to reach for it, you kind of get your hand chopped off. So you have that embedded in you, in this fear. And what triggers that? I was talking to a young lady the other day, and she said, I'm really sad. I'm really angry. I'm really frustrated because I put something out that was really nice. And I don't know why. I looked at this emoji of this laughing.
Hmm.
And she says, within that laughter, I found the name behind the face. And she goes, and it was somebody very near and dear to me. And I didn't realize how much that bothered me. And I said, well, what was it there? And she said, because I have such high respect for that person. I truly believe that everybody has their opinion, but don't push your opinion onto the next. She goes, I put something positive out, and somebody so near and dear laughed at me. And she goes, and that
Hmm.
triggered me. I was sad, but then I got angry.
Hmm.
And I felt the anger to want to be very mean. And so I said, well, what stopped you? And she said, I had to remember it was just an emoji, and that I had to take back my power and saying, you know, I feel really sad for this person that I felt very near and dear to me,
Hmm.
that they have to reflect on me, and that it severed part of our relationship, but that person has had to grow old, lonely, because she goes, I don't know if I can ever forget it because she was that hurt. And I said, well, that's something you can probably work on because you identified the problem. But while you're identifying the problem, think about all the other wonderfuls that you knew about this individual, because maybe that little emoji of laughing at what you thought was so critical, maybe that was their way of reaching out for help. And they had to entrust somebody that would call them out on it. So
Hmm.
I said, whenever you come up with something that you just want to scream, you have to think about what is that energy behind it. You know, let's take a step back from this moment and see what the physical diversion is happening here, not only to the individual, but to the space and beyond. When they go, why us? Why not us? But let's figure out why not us. What is that diversion in there? Who is going to be benefiting from it? Who is profiting from it? Who is going to be, who is going to be, you can go on who and who and who and who, but the fact that you got to stop somewhere, and that's where you control your space of getting your power back. You know, Many of us have many reasons what's happening here in Minnesota. We can think about a lot of things, because when you really speak about somebody that you knew and you're in conflict with, you're wondering how did that conflict become so great? And then when you start matching A to B, B to C, C to D, and then you have to turn around and you can try to figure out what this nonsense is and how much harm it's not just having on you, but beyond you, that echoes. You have to realize that there's a diversion happening, and that there really isn't a very sound, well person behind there, because we always say the simplicity of all hurt people hurt people. And when you look at this, here in Minnesota, they say it's ethnic cleansing. For me, I can say, yes, that's part of it, but that's not the full picture. It's the full picture here in Minnesota is that there's 11 tribes here in the state of Minnesota. And within these 11 tribes and this stuff, they hold a lot of importance here, and they're big employers to a lot of the state. And the Native Americans in this stuff, we know, had conflict with a person that owned other casinos in Atlantic City, and the frustration is there. And so you can start connecting the dots, but we think bygones are bygones, but some people hold and store it within them and kind of throw a key away until they need it again, or it's reminded that you've got excess baggage you're carrying. We also know that within our small Minnesota nice state, we had a governor that ran against this individual and that harbors a lot of resentment and anger, because when you look through the films of supporting in that, the audience is so great in this stuff. If people love that movement, where on the other part of it is you have to have other people fake what your audience looks by clipping and pasting people in there. And it's not to say that's really bad, but you have to really look at that real hurt person, why they have to do that. But when that hurt becomes hurt and it becomes not just a pile of wood, but it becomes a forest, and then when it turns into a match, that's when everything is going to blow and burn down. So this is where we're at here in Minnesota and out there. But part of it is that we have to look at the realities of who we are, not just as Indigenous people, as myself being Indigenous, but all people. Like I said, we have the 11 tribes and that they're Indigenous based. We also have a melting pot of a lot of the Native Americans throughout the United States and Canada. We also have a lot of mixed bloodlines and this stuff from Hispanic, even Asian, because we have large communities of that. And let me tell you, they're really rich. We're really rich in culture. There's just a lot going on. I mean, we have our celebrations of the LBGT, and this stuff, and we're supposed to be a safe haven for a lot of people. So we have this library of variety in this stuff, and I think that's how we were coined Minnesota Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened here in Minnesota was, I think people kind of took for granted how we mix as a beautiful puzzle. Because a lot of the minorities, a lot of the brown and black people, and not only brown and black people, it's people outside the country that are other races that may look Caucasian or even identify as Caucasian, but they're from another country and they're here going to one of our colleges and stuff. They don't care. They don't care. They don't care that they have this list what we're supposed to be going through. They have something that is even nurturing their frustration, pain. You can talk about a narcissistic person. You can talk about a person that carries so much energy in them that people say they're ADHD or whatever. You can go on and you can come with the ABCs and the stuff of describing the person's reason why they act that way.
Mm.
But you have to look beyond that. Is what was that first plan when they were in the womb for them to create such character? And you have to go from there. And excusing the situation, no, but it's how you approach the situation. Because you always say, when you get to that type of energy feeds off that same type of energy, so you can't mirror what they need. And that's why the frustration here in Minnesota is being so great, because, there could have been rioters knocking down windows and stealing, like during George Floyd. But the thing is with George Floyd, when they were having all the break-ins and this stuff and that, there were from people from outside Minnesota that were coming in and conquering and filling their cars up, and that was proven, when they were caught, where they were coming from, all the agitators and that there. So we're just in a time here that we really have to reflect. And we have to hold our space. And when we hold our space, we hold our sanity and we become good neighbors. Despite, and I could go on talking about the horrific horrors that are happening here, But I was saying, and I'm going to cry. I was standing in line buying some supplies for individual. And there was probably about 5, 6 other people behind me, Caucasians, because a lot of brown and black people don't like coming out. And the gentleman, not in front of me, but next to me, turned around and looked. And he says, put them all through and I'll pay for them all.
Mm.
I hugged him because that's being a good neighbor.
Mm.
Because he knew that a lot of Caucasian people were going out buying and filling the food shelves up and helping the ones that can't come out.
Yeah.
Even the ones that can't come out are elderly Caucasian people. Because what they're realizing now is that what makes Minnesota and most cities work, probably most parts of the United States lands work, are who they're hunting down. You know, they're farmers, they're Uber drivers, they're doctors, you name it, they're there. It doesn't have to be low income, they fit in all ranges, but they're being hunted down. You know, so when an elder calls an Uber driver that she needs her medicine picked up at one of the pharmacies, or she needs some of her food picked up, you know, over at one of the food places, there's nobody there because they hunted down Uber drivers, chased them down, rear-ended their cars. It was endless things of what was doing. So what people also don't realize is when this is happening, insurance companies and this stuff are waking up and they're saying, this is costing me so much. We need to pull back. We need to pull back on the businesses. We need to pull back on the autos. There's going to be a lot of claims in this stuff and out there. So that ripple effect of cost just radiates out. So we're in a standstill. And there's a lot of people that went to work. There's a lot of people that went to school. There was a lot of people that was living life till this happened. It stopped, literally stopped the normal functions of Minnesota. It's just not here in Minneapolis. It's not here in St. Paul. It's through the entire state. You know, there was even reports of semi drivers saying that they can't bring some of the rigs in because some of the ICE people were over in Hudson harassing them, asking them where they were going. You know, did they get those trailers in? I don't know.
Yeah.
You hear it from community, and we have the tendency, and we have to depend on our neighbors, community to community, to hear the truth of where it's going. Thus came the whistle. You know, what is the number one thing known for in Minnesota is the whistle,
Mm.
because that is the sound of alerts and this stuff to forewarn your neighbors of what is happening. And they just did not see it coming, because what they may say is they're going for the worst of the worst. Well, I'm sorry, the worst of the worst isn't in daycare center. The worst of the worst is not in our public schools or even in our colleges, or the worst of worst is in people in employment. The worst of the worst is not that. And let common sense reign throughout the world, and please listen. If you were the worst of the worst criminals and you were being hunted in your state, do you think you were just going to sit around and wait for them? They're gone. they're out of here. So what is the actual nonsense behind the waste spending of the dollars we're all putting in here? And you got to remember, a lot of the people they're hunting down, they're taxpayers too. So they're paying to be hunted. And we're paying for the repercussion. But I can tell you this, during the marches and this stuff, you know, it kind of looks like, oh, we're destroying, you know, the highways and this stuff by putting garbage cans in this stuff. Let me tell you, when the cameras and everything settled and out there, those garbage cans are picked up, taken back, they're cleaned up. People are there and they're cleaning because they love our city. There's no windows broken that's out there. There's no theft in out there. We have restaurants and bookstores and this stuff opening up as warming houses, and come on in, use a bathroom and out there. You know, they're giving out free food and out there. So what we have been doing is we have been using our own networks to whatever profit we may get in and out there to pass it on and buy for the food shelves that are out there and having the delivery people, take from the food shelves. And, people are scared to even identify where it's coming because you don't know who they're going to be locked into. And so, it just tells the world right now that in order for what our convenient lifestyles are, we need one another. We need one another. Because if they take half away, then we take half away our own quote unquote luxuries of how we live. We're not going to have any delivery people. We're not going to have anybody, making a beautiful meal for us in a beautiful restaurant. We're not going to have people that's going to be security through the airport. We're not going to have a lot of things in this stuff and that there. So a lot of the worst and the worst kind of really surprises us Minnesotans because a lot of the worst and the worst that we're witnessing, seeing what are happening are tax-paying people that are people are going to school to get the education.
Mhm.
They're bringing up things that had happened years ago that our people at the Capitol, our legal people and stuff have been working on for years.
Mhm.
So what is the game here? What is the harm? And like I said, it's uh, for Native Americans here alone, as well as all people, is the most recent community that can identify us is a Jewish community. And I've met a lot of them lately that still have their numbers tattooed on their hands, just like Native Americans carry a number. We have to carry our tribal ID registrations because we hold dual citizenships and that they're the original people. But not only that, you have to think of the other ones, the other individual residents that there that have residency, that have been birthed here and this stuff. They have to carry more papers in that there. You have never heard of any place in the United States that you had to be so visible to where your roots are embedded at to be legal here. Who does that?
Yeah, well,
Who does that?
it sounds like an occupying force, the way you're talking about it. That the federal agents who have come in have occupied Minnesota and especially Minneapolis.
You know, I was talking to also a lot of veterans, and crossing that line because they're angry because they sworn by the oath, they protected the oath, and they're angry. They're angry because they know probably a majority of these ICE people probably weren't even in the military.
Yeah.
And why is your face masked? And why would you do such horrific thing? And it really hit home to a lot of people because even with Renee Good, her last words were, I forgive you.
I'm not mad at you, dude.
I'm not mad at you.
Yeah.
And so when you really look at that, there is a different picture, a different view, a different skin color that really sounded the alarm because we were already pre-programmed to accept brown and black people, foreign people, to be harmed. That was a pre-programming in us ever since 500 plus years ago, or that's a traditional um, system that has been brought down through, not just colonialism here within the United States, but colonialism in every territory on every land throughout the world. What is that? Uh, what the dictators had put in play that is here. And so we can't really go into each group and own it and say, they harmed us in this stuff. This is just inhumane behavior. At least us as the Native Americans, and I'm sure, and I know many other cultures, many other cultures, has their ancestral values, and we all kind of sing the same tune: is you can't eat money. You know, the most valuable thing is the earth, and that there of what's going to provide us. The most valuable thing is going to be water, and the protection of the clean air and out there, the four elements and out there. And right now it's being violated so much. So that's what we have to think about. What is the diversions behind everything that's happening? Because you got to remember a lot of people that come in with such addictive behavior, they know darn well they're not going to live forever. So what do they got to lose, right? But they don't really realize what comes after them is they harm the very children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren that they claim to love by not providing them with such organicness of the way the world used to be.
Mhm. I know you think a lot about the 7 generations before and to come. And yeah, I wonder what wisdom you were drawing on from your ancestors. That
Uh, they said, there's going to come a time when our wells are tainted. And when we nourish from it, our behaviors will be tainted.
Mhm.
And so that stuck with me throughout this time and out there because, like I said, when your shell is broken, and if you were born in a womb where something may have happened, we know nothing happens to our spirits. Our spirits are kind of like the battery of who we are. That's who we are. Because, we come in here and we're going to leave and our body stays. And that is my belief system. Um, you kind of wonder what happened there. We get mad. We could buy something in the store and it's defective. We can take it back and get a new one. Well, you can't do that to human beings. And it seems like we have a lot of human beings in this world that have permanent defects because of how they were brought into this world. Intentionally to be broken, no, because as we know, and I think everybody's heard of me speaking before, is that alcohol is the notorious drug throughout this planet, and it's legal, and it's pushed on people and other, and
Mhm.
that's the most harmful drug of all, no matter how you look at it.
Mhm.
Because it plays with people's decisions. And you can't even say decisions because if you were born in a womb that was toxic in out there, you may not have the the mechanics in your brain to process things like that. So
Mhm.
that's why you have to kind of really look at when you're going back in time of what made this person the way it is. You really have to look at the mechanics of who they are as individuals. That makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that we're born into a toxic culture also. It's
Yeah,
not just about the physical body, but the culture, the larger body.
absolutely. Because you got to think about it, within our seven teachings and this stuff. Many people was, they cry out. Excuse me a minute. I just have to grab a Kleenex
Mhm.
here. Um, uh, and I have to say thank you, Tree.
Mhm.
um, my granddaughter asked me, Kukum, why are some children so mean? And why do they kind of hang out in little groups or little cliques and this stuff? And I said, I want you to think about it. Step away from it. Pretend like you're looking down. Pretend like you're a drone and you're watching what's happening. And then follow the leader all the way home to see what happens there. Because I bet you that leader, when it goes home, is like you because they're mimicking what's happening at home and they're the littler person there. So they become the behaviors when they go into this outer world here. So if it bothers you, walk around them because they're really not that important in your life. They're not going to help you breathe. They're not going to pay your rent. They're not going to make you laugh. But what they are going to teach you how to be is to be forgiving.
Mhm.
You know, they just taught you what not to be.
Mm.
Walk around them. So, a lot of these lessons and a lot of things that are happening in this stuff and that there, you really do have to take a few steps back, especially when you've got such explosive energy in you. And you have to see, where can I use this right now? And really, where is it coming from? And how can I use some of it to support in a good way? For me, as supporting our governor here, our lieutenant governor here, supporting, you know, our senators, our representatives in this stuff that are really getting it bad. They have to march from one place to the other. How can we be there to support them? And I want to support, for me, as much as I can, is my encounters that I had with them. We may not agree on everything in this stuff, but that doesn't mean I'm going to hate you until, the day you vanish from my sight. It's that we disagreed on something, but I might agreed on you on 85% of the other So we have that type of relationship, you know, with our attorney general in this stuff, and all the attorneys in this stuff in here, you know, we have to support them in a sense because they still have to go home to families. They have to still really look at it. They're still part of the neighborhood. They're still part of the communities. But sometimes how they feel so defeated because they don't want to be a band-aid to the pain that's inflicted on us. They want to stop the infliction before it even becomes a wound.
Mhm.
And so that's a lot of responsibility. So how do we move forward within that arena of being positive? And what I'm talking about, that's why we have our spiritual leaders that are in here. That's why we have this individual person or this leaders of where we can just really have that safe space to vent. We have that safe space to cry, that safe space to even say what we don't want to hear, you know, because a lot of times people will go, oh, I support them. I believe in what they're doing because I don't want them around us. And then we hear another group saying, well, then maybe you need to go home with us because these are not your lands. You don't even know where you come from. So they get into those arguments. So, how do we weave ourselves in there to help stop this fire from turning into a forest fire? And that's what we have to do, as saying is, we have to understand where they're coming from. We don't have to agree or disagree. We have to move around them because we're coming 1,000, or it might be just one of them. Keep moving ahead.
Mhm.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it seems to me that the spiritual leaders in Minneapolis and spiritual leaders who are flying in to be in solidarity have been really important right now, and in, like you say, supporting the community.
You know, yes, they are. But the other thing is they're reminders that each person has that same spiritual power in them.
Mhm.
They have that goodness in them. So they reflect a lot of reminders of how they have that own spiritual power of awakening in them, that they have their greater goodness. And some of them will say, well, no, no, I really don't. But yet you have the behaviors of your grandmother that she was really a spiritual being and this stuff, or you have part of you, and that characteristic comes through that ancestral knowledge. So you do. And then when they hear that, they get it right away. Well, they always said, I was part of, but you have to remember the goodness within. One person said, uh, with every flock comes a menace, and with every menace comes a good flock to remind them that they're still there walking with them.
Mm.
And I had to process that one. I had to really think, oh God, that's a good one. That's a really good thing to really take to, because why did I carry that with me for, God, I want to say days upon days. And it really had to stick with me, and I had to think about it. And the other evening when I was with a lot of my neighbors in the suburbs holding candlelight, for Alex at 7 p.m. And I'm telling you, I have so admiration for a lot of Minnesotans because let me tell you, during this time, if you were just walking alone 3, 4 blocks in this weather, you probably would have froze to death. It was that bitter. So I really believe the mountains and mountains of the individual provide that heat and production and that there up around. And that's what happened within that evening in that there. We had a lot of people yelling out the windows, get home and, really negative derogatory things and this stuff that, um, so and so live on forever, and yes, he's my king, and all that. You really heard all of this stuff. Yeah, I heard it, and we've even had some cars kind of swerve at us like they were going to hit us,
Mhm.
but yet we stood. But I reflected once, and my granddaughter just said, "Kuka, what are you doing?" Because I don't know, I was cold, number one, and I was, thinking about prayers, and I was talking to all my neighbors and out there. And we really had a rich conversation. And then I had this one little snot-nosed teenager drive by, flip me off, and just say some really profound stuff to me and this stuff and telling me to, you know, they're going to send me back where I'm coming from. And I'm thinking, because I'm indigenous of these territories, of course, something just came right out of my mouth. It was no swearing word, but something just came out of me. And I reflected their behavior. And my granddaughter hit me. She goes, "God, I can't believe you said that." And I'm thinking, well, believe it. It happened. I'm human. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you probably are driving down the road that is from one of our casinos and you probably lost all the money. Identified I was Native American. You had that was my reasoning for me to be okay with the situation. I had to find some humor in it. I had to find some richness of healing. And I said, "You're right." And I had to look at my granddaughter. I said, "You're right." For that was a child I just screamed at. And that was a child that I talk about to the world in this stuff that we should not harm, that we should be
Hmm.
the picture of who they need to be. And I resorted back to their age.
Mm.
So we laughed. I mean, a lot of the people, my new neighbors, they just laughed. They thought, oh gosh, because obviously they know I'm a senior, I'm an elder, and I put it out there again. I did not swear, but it was just the energy that came out of me, and that was the first time
Mm.
during these happenings that I felt that energy. I really felt that energy, and I had to draw it back and be okay with it. But on the other hand, in that very stinging weather and the stuff of me being so angry, my whole body warmed up. So it's good to go for a few more times. So yeah, that's how you kind of have to really think about it. But the majority of individuals where we're at are awesome.
Hmm.
And I really feel the ones that are residents of these lands that are not, I mean, that are really okay with having this negative behavior in out there. We really have to look at them as being wounded people.
Mhm.
And we're going to have to approach them that way. And we're going to have to kind to settle these fires and be reminded that, you know, there's storms and there's always can be a calm through the storm and that, but in order to get on the other side of that storm, we still have to have those pathways of the calmness to be on there because if the calmness comes, we'll all burn up.
Mhm.
We have to be reminded of that. So yeah, so it's coming across on reminding us we're human. You know, I may wear a hat and it's not a halo. It's yeah, I have to really visit because I am all over the world. I do have to visit when I look at other indigenous communities and what people say, they're not rich or they're not this and they're not that, but they are. They're organic. When you go into the forest and you see a lot of the tribal people, or when you go into the mountains and you see them, they know their medicines, they know their lands, they're organic.
Mhm.
We need them.
Mm.
We need those individuals. Otherwise, we will no longer exist, because if we keep destroying the planet as we are, we keep lessening the food that reaches our plate on the table. So, I think, on keeping that, yeah, in the morning, I always say my morning prayers, because I'm always so blessed that I get to open my eyes for one more day. I take in my first breath and I keep reminding myself of everything that I inhale as every person and being and things on this planet. We're all in relationship. And what I choose to exhale is a lot of the negatives of that first breath I carry in, and try to do the best I can. Try to be as humble as I possibly can. Try not to be a sticky tape and be a victim to the nonsense. There was one thing that I wanted to share with you that had came to me while I was listening to a few people, and part of it was I wrote it down because I had a million and one things
Mhm.
on my mind, and it was playing itself out. Yeah, I don't believe in getting new computers. This computer is probably older than my great granddaughter. As long as it works, I use it, right? Um, so because she says, "Why isn't the world listening?" And I really I played that. I had to really play that over, and I said, "Honey," I said, "What do you mean by not listening?" I said, "I think a lot of them are listening." They said, "No." They look and they see and they think, "Oh, it's happening over in Minnesota," and they go back to their way of life.
Mm.
So I wrote, "Listen, listen to the noise, for all the noise is not a segregation sound. It is a noise that echoes throughout all the houses of every human being. Listen, listen to the many voices and power, diversions, distractions of the sounds that echo throughout the airs and in our Minnesota air. Be mindful that all the air does not settle within these walls of Minnesota. It will carry throughout all the lands of what we used to know as Freedom Land of the free. Listen, listen to all the interpretations of all the town criers. Warnings echo through the whistles of the freedom warriors. Be alert that these warnings are not just for a few. It is the warning for all. Listen, listen, and be reminded that these voices rather be for freedom or conquering. Be on alert, or be warned that as of today, it may be your tomorrows. If we choose to continue to cover our ears and not listen. And that came from my granddaughters and my great granddaughters of how do we become somebody so simple in order to be heard? How do we become visible for their benefits? How do we become a symbol of grandeur and happiness instead of warnings and stop? So these are things that people need to think about, is that Minnesota is not a novelty of events happening. This is real. This movement is already in Michigan. This movement was in California. This movement was in New York. This movement was in Chicago. This movement's here. This movement is everywhere. It's just becoming louder.
Mm.
There's no safety. It's sad because at our airport, why are people that had already gone through customs, had already gone through all security to identify who they are, get off the plane to be met with ICE agents wanting their papers? That doesn't make sense. And especially when you have spiritual leaders all over the place and they're lined up and they're knelt down. And it's just was horrible. And they were arrested and all put on buses.
Hmm.
And some of them don't have papers on them
Well,
other than their ID. Because some of them may speak with maybe a Swedish accent, somebody with a Spanish accent, whatever it may be.
mhm.
But Yeah, we are in a space right now of having to be extremely aware because the nightmares just become extremely visible and real. It may not be ours, but it's the ones that are so wounded that they are making sure that they are seen and heard.
And we're living in their nightmare suddenly.
Well, we're not so much as living in their nightmare, they're trying to pull us into their nightmare.
Yeah, that's it. Mhm.
And they don't like it because we're not, we're not going in, and it's horrific because if you see and hear happening on the streets, and myself, I can take my hat off and dress in winter gear and walk through the noise and walk through the chants and walk through the happiness and walk through the power in that there and absorb my surrounding.
Mhm.
I'm filled with joy and happiness and good neighborhood until I get up to the metal. And the metal is the body armor, the masked people, everything. And they kind of like have no eyes. And they're kind of like there's no spirit in them.
Mhm.
You often wonder when we would say we have to be careful for AI, artificial intelligence, because that has no heartbeat. And so, how does that manipulate almost one as if their consciousness was taken?
Mhm.
And for me, witnessing it this is such a cult mentality.
Mhm.
You can't give them the power. You have to pity them in a sense that, yes, these individuals are fathers, probably grandfathers, very few women in there that are mothers. But it's just what you're teaching at home.
Yeah.
And are you giving your own children to be a target if you were unmasked and unveiled like you are doing to the other one? When does the silliness stop? Because the craziest thing is even when the Ku Klux Klan, you can remember back some of the Klansmen as they got older realized that their life of hatred, some of them surrendered it because they could no longer hate their grandchildren because their daughters or son, as you put it, interbreeded with impurities.
Mhm.
But love prevailed, and that's what I was getting at. Love always prevails. It has this unique power of warmth over a person that hates so much, and it may even come through a child, and it may be their own bloodline. Because how can you hate part of your own seeds that come from you? Because the world is becoming so blended.
Mhm.
How is it for you to tell your child you can't speak to one of your best friends because you're a different color? You
Mhm.
know, and those people are growing up saying, I'm not little anymore. I'm going to be a part of it. I am going to be a part of the positive movement. I want to live happy. I want to breathe. That's all I want to do is I just want to breathe. I want these hands ripped from my throat. I just want to breathe.
Mhm. Are you seeing young people come out and participate?
Oh my gosh. It's every levels. It's every levels. I cannot tell you. Um, you have hand warmers, you have people handing water bottles out. You have people even with bags and this stuff picking up the waste, but put it in there with recycle. I just love that. They were recycling. Okay, wait a minute here. And then somebody was really mad and they were, you know, screaming, go home, ice, go home and this stuff. And they went to throw things and they, oh, wait a minute. And they were turning around and they were looking for, is there composting or is there my heart, my heart in my moment and this stuff. Everybody, the thing you just gotta love those moments. And it's like, no, we got the bags, and there's people carrying bags and the stuff for compost and, sandwiches and then picking up and things. I mean, it's here, it's real. It happens that way. If you need gloves or if you need food or, whatever it is. And a lot of them are young people. You got to remember, not just within it, they're hitting our colleges left and right. Colleges are having walkouts. They smoke bomb a high school. It's just not one school, it's a few other schools. It's all over the place because they go where they know they're going to get them and they don't care who they're going through. So a lot of these kids are afraid. And so a lot of these kids are standing up. A lot of these kids are saying, I want to be with the people. I believe in freedom. I believe in the passage for all. I cannot sit back. I cannot be apart. I cannot ignore. Even when they tell me to ignore, I can't. And if it means my freedom here of learning my education in the United States, so be it. I'm not doing anything. I'm not throwing anything. I am just being, I am with the people because they are protecting my freedom as much as I want to protect freedom in general. And how powerful is that, right? Individuals doing walkouts and this stuff and out there. But yeah, uh, I don't know. It's just this format and this platform for Minnesota is going to be probably the initial footprint for freedom in the United States because we were the war zone. And I want to say were because it'll soon be was. And history's being made here because of the people, because of the power of the people, because of the operations of how we are within our government systems. Yeah, still a little, whatever it is. But we deal with that. It's the power of the voice and power of the choice. It's the power in what we value freedom to be as. Um, yeah, we just have to keep believing in that so we can use this cloaking device we have for staying within those 7 teachings of balance because love is very powerful. But if you put it in the dark side, it's lust and very damaging things can come from lust.
Hmm.
You can neutralize yourself and know that difference so you know which pathway you want to be on. Will become the outcome, will become the sun that follows you, will become the flowers that will blossom all around you, will become the smiles that you open your eyes to, will become the hugs and will be the embrace of a lot of people. And I had said that once. People said, "Oh my God, you must be an old hippie." I said, "I was born a hippie. What are you talking about? I don't care what you call me. I'm just born happy." It's it's something that's going to be memorialized. It's going to be remembered throughout time. Is that Minnesota, we're good neighbors. We were good neighbors to one another. We were good people to one another. It's good to be a Minnesotan. It's good to say we believe in the power of the people and we believe in freedom. That makes sense?
Ah, beautiful. It's just beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. I think looking into the future, this does feel like a turning point. It feels, and Minnesota is at the center of the United States, and it seems like it's at the center of this turning point that's happening. And
Well, if you take Canada and the United States and put it on a thing and you fold it up into fours and you open it up, there sits Minnesota.
yeah,
It's right in the center of the turtle. Um, that's why we call Canada and the United States the turtle. It's a turtle shell. It's our teachings. It's our first teachings. Of how the world came into play, and so there's so much richness behind it. But you know, humanity is a target right now,
mm, mhm.
and everybody has to realize that. Is that are you going to play in this game, or are you going to rip the sheet up and say, "Not today. Not going to be your target today." It's just not okay. And it's amazing how money and finances is kind of the ammunition and the bullets and the cemeteries to this all.
Mm-hmm. You always follow the money. Yes.
Yeah. And you can't eat it, and it's not gonna, if you're gonna kill off all your farmers, if you're gonna kill off all the climate activists, and we always say too, we're not protesters, we're protectors.
Mm-hmm.
And let that set in with you. They like to use the word protesting, which is okay as long as you have something good. But behind that protesting is we're protecting our values and the values for all mankind,
Mm-hmm.
all living things in this planet. And there's something that you have to really nourish off those words and say it as it is. Because you can't really argue with that. What are you protecting? I'm protecting these gardens so even my enemies' tables can be filled for their children to nourish from.
Yeah. But you have a minority of very greedy people who are trying to hoard it all for themselves. And that is a huge part of the problem that we're in. So
You're
Minnesota,
not going to live on forever.
no,
Thank God, I said, thank God we have an expiration date, right? And even for me too, I said, oh, would I really want to live any longer and this stuff and that there? And I'm thinking, I'm only here for a good reason and do what I can. If for some reason, if I don't wake up tomorrow, I lived a good life. If I live to be 100, oh, there's going to be a lot of aches and pains of age and stuff. I still lived a good life. You just got to really think about you and how well you move in this space, because when there's a lot of darkness, you got to be part of the light and keep showing people to not let their flicker of light go out on them.
Yeah, well, I think there's a real need for elders like you to be the light, to be beacons for everybody.
Well, that's nice to say, but I was so disappointed because I was thinking, gosh, I could really maybe go to any one of the islands in the world and just sit down, and I like to be with all my other spiritual elder buddies and stuff, and just have a good laugh and have a good meal and whatever, just sit there and just say, oh gosh, can we just rest? But that would probably last a day, and then we'd all be going off into our own directions. We just don't know how to behave. It's just like we're there for one another, and that's what makes me feel good. I have all the richness of my support around the world, that we know when something heavy is around them, that we will wrap them with good energy to let them know that
Yeah,
we're there.
I remember that you were in Greenland, right?
Mhm.
So what's the Indigenous network like in Greenland?
Oh my gosh, they probably
It's another whole conversation.
they just think everything over here is cuckoo and like, what the heck? And somebody had said, like everybody says, we've allowed free passage and stuff for United States citizens and this stuff for a lot of the military and this stuff that's free. But they're wondering what is behind a diversion, because in Greenland there's a lot of airspace. So who can benefit from the airspace?
Mm-hmm.
So they said, serve that up on your main course. So what I really hear from a lot of them is that, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you guys are going through this. I'm so sorry that you've got a naughty captain at your ship, and I'm so sorry that you're sinking. But what we can do to you is we can send out life rafts to you. They have this real mentality of realism.
Mm-hmm.
Because if anybody really wants to steal something, wouldn't you want to steal 4 seasons or 2 seasons or something where you can really relax and have the wonderful? It's a lot of ice. A lot of times it's all daylight. A lot of times dark. So they enjoy it. They love it. They can nurture off what their generational ancestral things are. They embrace the history and all this stuff. But coming from outside, they hear an echo of nonsense because there's a diversion. And what is it there that they want? And it's airspace, they said. Who will benefit from the airspace?
Yeah. Well, controlling the airspace. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyways, they always say, and then plus with climate control and this stuff, you got to be careful, because how much land is really underneath the ice? So, um, and how much of the land is really can reproduce other foods, because there's parts of it that don't have trees, it's rock based.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of that that's going on. But, you know, but they're fishermen, you know, they know how to survive. They know the basics of life. They don't need to have the monstrous necessities that a majority of the United States people and other, because boy, we're just if we took everything and put it in a pile, we wouldn't even be able to recycle everything that everybody has in their homes.
Yeah.
We just have this real diversion of marketing individual of what they need and the process of funding, and and it's almost like feeding and building, what do you call it all, like an alcoholic, like a drug addict,
An addiction.
an addiction, the word I'm looking for, and it becomes a norm. And so when people say, well, I'm not an addict, you have to really think about it. First of all, define addiction. And second of all, what can't you live without?
Yeah. Well, there's a real possibility that the Western civilization way of life may collapse. And then I think it's the indigenous people who are still close to the land who will know how to survive without all those luxuries that we take for granted. Yeah. And there's so much valuable wisdom there that I think really needs to be held and passed on the way you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all learn from one another.
Mhm.
We do. I may know my homelands and know what to grow, but if I was put on the other side of the world,
Right.
you know, and that's why we depend on one another. And it's not wanting to learn and to conquer. We're there to be a student and respect and support. You know, big, big difference. Because my gosh, you know, bananas or some fruit or vegetables or even trees and stuff could not grow in my part of the territory. So why would I want to take that and try to do it here?
Mhm.
I know that's almost like stealing a child and expecting that child to grow up in a foreign language that they'll never understand. So I mean, just even the quality of life, even if you look at within this climate environment and out there, there's a lot of trees that aren't supposed to be here that were brought over because it was familiar to them or it looks pretty, you
Mhm.
know. So hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we manipulated the land, and that's theft. That is just horrible. And the other part of it too is, manipulating the water flow, and what you can do with it. And when you don't really think about it, they think the planet's full with water, but how much of that water is drinkable? And they know by being naughty and on wanting to drill and do all this stuff for minerals and that there it takes millions upon millions of gallons of fresh water to keep those machines going because salt water can't do it. So what is it going to be depleting? And by that, what is it going to be remapping land? It's going to be remapping the land underneath the water and out there. And it's going to be depleting that memory within that water. And that water is not going to flow right. So what we're doing is we're initially cutting off the flow of water to our own self-being. You know, we say, oh, we got water here, we got water in these bottles and water from tap. That water has no life in it. That's just liquid. You know, you got to eat 8 to 10 glasses of water a day to make sure your body. No, that's just liquid going in your body. At one point, if you go to the spring wells and the stuff where you have all the natural, nutrients in it and the stuff, you can take a handful of water, drink it, and it fills every portion of your body and out there, and you're good for 2 or 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no plastic involved.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? When people start really having to look at, even for my family too, even for myself, I was enticed and fell into this world of manipulation of what you really think you need in out there, and myself, learning about what plastics is doing to the body, even for the memory and all of this stuff, what does aluminum have done to it, what is canned foods and this stuff, everything that they told you we can do for you easy, we can get into your hands actually is harming us. But the other part of it too is, a lot of the organic farmers and this stuff right now is who the ones we're trying to deport and do everything else to. And then we deport them home, and then we want them to get out of the area that they live in because what they're doing is deforestation. So we have this manipulation of people that are just not doing rural planning very well. It just drives me crazy because I'm thinking, okay.
Yeah.
And that's why all our voices matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the wisdom that needs to be shared above all maybe is about resilience and coming together.
Absolutely. And that's what is defined Minnesota strong and being a good neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
Neighbor to neighborhood, and it just grows from a community to community. And it just grows on and on and on. Is I want to be a reflection of that person that took that gas bomb from because they said, we don't want you here. We want to protect that child. We want to protect that school. We want to protect our streets. We want to protect this. What was wrong with us?
Mm-hmm.
They don't realize that we had ICE offices here. We had the norm of operations and the stuff that was working,
Mm-hmm.
And if we didn't, why did this happen 30 years ago? 20 years ago, 10 years ago? Why is it right now?
Mm-hmm.
Who's the martyr that's behind this? And so you really have to look at it. But when you even do find that martyr is you have to look at why they're so broken. So you don't become broke with them.
Yeah.
You have to be the bigger person. And I'm reminding them that no matter how old they are, you're looking at an infant that we don't know what they went through to determine who they are today. But apparently it wasn't very nice.
So a kind of radical compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of Valerie Kaur. Have you heard of her?
Name sounds familiar. Why does that sound familiar? Tell me more.
She's a Sikh author and activist. She wrote a book called See No Stranger.
Mm.
She talks a lot about revolutionary love and that we have to, love even our opponents and love strangers and find love in our hearts for everyone, including ourselves. It's like this radical compassion that she's preaching, really. She was in Minnesota, I guess last weekend, and doing some talking. I just heard her speak, and seems like she says revolutionary love is the call of our times.
Yeah, or love the being before you.
Yeah, and I think Minnesota is showing us what that looks like. It's really inspiring and sobering. It's not easy. This is not an easy path that we're on, and it's not going to be easy to get off it. but we have a lot to learn from those on the front lines now.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of really good people that are boots on the ground, like right now there's a march going on. There's things happening all over through Minnesota. There's big gatherings and this stuff where they're having, serving food and this stuff, that are, a neighbor has to do something, they don't know how to do it or they've never been in it. But what do you reach for? Food. What can I do? Because
Mhm.
if I can fill you, hopefully, we can fill each other's soul with being a good neighbor. So I mean, yeah, it could be really easy and I could go on for days and weeks and maybe years being negative, but where's it going to get me, right?
Mhm.
And I think when you find the balance, uh, you really hold your space in this time within this planet.
The balance, the
Yeah.
balance, and the grounding. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I know I've taken a lot of your time, but so appreciated. And it's great to see you.
For
Yeah,
your viewers, it's still here.
it's still
Anybody can read it, any part of the pages.
full
I,
full of wisdom lessons. Yeah. And anytime you're ready to write another volume, we should be in touch.
I have been working on a few. Um, and then for some odd reason, times like this, I get sidetracked. And like I said, there's times where in April I'm at the UN, and I'm usually there for about 3 weeks or more. And then I try to go to upstate New York, to visit some friends or maybe do some other work. And then in June, I'm in Bonn, Germany at the UN, for pre-meetings and stuff before the big COP meetings, which COP 31 was to be in Australia, but they changed it. They put it back to the Middle East in Turkey. Um, and it's going to be kind of unsettling because we don't know what the Middle East is going to be like right now. And this past COP in Brazil was really eye-opening.
Hmm.
Um, we knew there was a shift there. Um, yeah, and I think it's listening and seeing some tides become typhoons. And sometimes right now it feels like there's going to be no calm and how well we're going to weather through some things. Um, but I think having one another and keeping each other safe is the key right now. And do not feed into the negative, even though the negative is got their hands around your throat. It's
Mm.
it I guess you can say it is what it is, but I know who I am. And I can only give what I believe in. But I will never take what you think I'm going to take because it's not mine for me to carry. I can only carry what I choose to carry, and
Mm.
it's not somebody else's baggage. And
Mhm.
I'll leave it at that one. But yeah, keep the prayers going for Minnesota. I think keep the prayers for the entire United States. You know, I would keep the prayers for the planet. Um, I just really want to remind everybody when you feel such anger and that negative come over you, step back from it because you're allowing your own spirit and stuff to be taken. It's okay to be angry, but find out what you're angry at. Find the problem where you're angry at, and fill the rest of the space with the power of energy for them to awaken because they don't know any better.
Mm.
And so you almost have to become a parent to that little child that was lacking in the nourishment that they needed to be a good person. Don't be, the martyr that continues to show them what they're very familiar with, and that's hate. That
Mm-hmm.
makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Another way of saying be the change you want to see in the world. Don't mirror back what you don't want to see, because we don't want to amplify that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And Minnesota strong. We are with you. And
Yeah. Listen with your eyes wide open.
mhm, mhm.
All righty, my dear.